Section 4 of the Metamorphoses by Ovid, translated by Frank Justice Miller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Thomas Copeland. Book 3. And now, the god, having put off disguise of the bull, owned himself for what he was, and reached the fields of Crete. But the maiden's father, ignorant of what had happened, bids his son Cadmus go and search for the lost girl, and threatens exile as a punishment if he does not find her, pious and guilty by the same act. After roaming over all the world in vain, for who could search out the secret loves of Jove, Agenor's son becomes an exile, shunning his father's country and his father's wrath. Then, in suppliant wise, he consults the oracle of Thebes, seeking thus to learn in what land he is to settle. Thebes replies, "A heifer will meet you in the wilderness, one who has never worn the yoke or drawn the crooked plough. Follow where she leads, and where she lies down to rest upon the grass, there see that you build your cities' walls, and call the land Boeotia." Note, the land of the heifer. Return to text. Hardly had Cadmus left the Castalian grotto when he saw a heifer moving slowly along, all unguarded, and wearing on her neck no mark of service. He follows in her track with deliberate steps, silently giving thanks the while to Phoebus for showing him the way. And now the heifer had passed the fords of Cephisus and the fields of Panope, when she halted, and lifting towards the heavens her beautiful head, with its spreading horns, she filled the air with her lowings, and then, looking back upon those who were following close behind, she kneeled, and let her flank sink down upon the fresh young grass. Cadmus gave thanks, reverently pressed his lips upon the stranger land, and greeted the unknown mountains and the plains. With intent to make sacrifice to Jove, he bade his attendants hunt out a spring of living water for libation. There was a primeval forest there, scarred by no axe, and in its midst a cave, thick set about with shrubs and pliant twigs. With well-fitted stones it fashioned a low arch, whence poured a full-welling spring, and deep within dwelt a serpent sacred to Mars. The creature had a wondrous golden crest, fire flashed from his eyes, his body was all swollen with venom, his triple tongue flickered out and in, and his teeth were ranged in triple row. When with luckless steps the wayfarers of the Tyrian race had reached this grove, they let down their vessels into the spring, breaking the silence of the place. At this the dark serpent thrust forth his head out of the deep cave, hissing horribly. The urns fell from the men's hands, their blood ran cold, and horror-struck they were seized with a sudden trembling. The serpent twines his scaly coils in rolling knots, and with a spring curves himself into a huge bow, and lifted high by more than half his length into the unsubstantial air, he looks down upon the whole wood, as huge, could you see him all, as is that serpent in the sky that lies outstretched between the twin bears. He makes no tarrying, but seizes on the Phoenicians, whether they are preparing for fighting or for flight, or whether very fear holds both in check. Some he slays with his fangs, some he crushes in his constricting folds, and some he stifles with the deadly corruption of his poisoned breath. The sun had reached the middle heavens, and drawn close the shadows, and now Cadmus, wondering what has delayed his companions, starts out to trace them. For shield he has a lion's skin, for weapon a spear with glittering iron point, and a javelin, and, better than all weapons, a courageous soul. When he enters the wood and sees the corpses of his friends all slain, and victorious above them their huge-bodied foe licking their piteous wounds with bloody tongue, he cries, "Oh, ye poor forms, most faithful friends! Either I shall avenge your death, or be your comrade in it." So saying, he heaved up a massive stone with his right hand, and with mighty effort hurled its mighty bulk. Under such a blow high ramparts would have fallen, towers and all, but the serpent went unscathed, protected against that strong stroke by his scales as by an iron doublet, and by his hard dark skin. But that hard skin cannot withstand the javelin too, which now is fixed in the middle fold of his tough back, and penetrates with its iron head deep into his flank. The creature, mad with pain, twists back his head, views well his wound, and bites at the spear shaft fixed therein. Then, when by violent efforts he had loosened this all round, with difficulty he tore it out, but the iron head remained fixed in the backbone. Then, indeed, fresh fuel was added to his native wrath. His throat swells with full veins, and white foam flecks his horrid jaws. The earth resounds with his scraping scales, and such rank breath as he exhales from the Stygian cave befouls the tainted air. Now he coils in huge spiral folds, now shoots up, straight and tall as a tree. Now he moves on with huge rush, like a stream in flood, sweeping down with his breast the trees in his path. Cadmus gives way a little, receiving his foe's rushes on the lion skin, and holds in check the ravening jaws with his spear point thrust well forward. The serpent is furious, bites vainly at the hard iron, and catches the sharp spearhead between his teeth. And now from his venomous throat the blood begins to trickle, and stains the green grass with spattered gore. But the wound is slight, because the serpent keeps backing from the thrust, drawing away his wounded neck, and by yielding keeps the stroke from being driven home, nor allows it to go deeper. But Cadmus follows him up, and presses the planted point into his throat, until at last an oak tree stays his backward course, and neck and tree are pierced together. The oak bends beneath the serpent's weight, and the stout trunk groans beneath the lashings of his tail. While the conqueror stands gazing on the huge bulk of his conquered foe, suddenly a voice sounds in his ears. He cannot tell whence it comes, but he hears it saying, "Why, O son of Agenor, dost thou gaze on the serpent thou hast slain? Thou too shalt be a serpent for men to gaze on." Long he stands there with quaking heart and pallid cheeks, and his hair rises up on end with chilling fear. But behold, the hero's helper, Pallas, gliding down through the high air, stands beside him, and she bids him plough the earth, and plant therein the dragon's teeth, destined to grow into a nation. He obeys, and having opened up the furrows with his deep-sunk plough, he sows in the ground the teeth as he is bid, a man-producing seed. Then, a thing beyond belief, the ploughed ground begins to stir, and first there spring up from the furrows the points of spears, then helmets with colored plumes waving, next shoulders of men, and breasts, and arms laden with weapons come up, and the crop grows with the shields of warriors. So when on festal days the curtain in the theatre is raised, figures of men rise up, showing first their faces, then little by little all the rest, until at last, drawn up with steady motion, the entire forms stand revealed, and plant their feet upon the curtain's edge. Frightened by this new foe, Cadmus was preparing to take his arms. "Take not your arms," one of the earth-sprung brood cried out, "and take no part in our fratricidal strife." So saying, with his hard sword he clave one of his earth-born brothers, fighting hand to hand, and instantly he himself was felled by a javelin thrown from far. But he also who had slain this last had no longer to live than his victim, and breathed forth the spirit which he had but now received. The same dire madness raged in them all, and in mutual strife by mutual wounds these brothers of an hour perished. And now the youth, who had enjoyed so brief a span of life, lay writhing on their mother earth, warm with their blood, all save 5. One of these was Actaeon, who at Pallas' bidding dropped his weapons to the ground, and sought and made peace with his surviving brothers. These the Sidonian wanderer had as comrades in his task when he founded the city granted him by Phoebus' oracle. And now Thebes stood complete. Now thou couldst seem, O Cadmus, even in exile a happy man. Thou hast obtained Mars and Venus too, as parents of thy bride. Add to this blessing children worthy of so noble a wife, so many sons and daughters, the pledges of thy love, and grandsons too, now grown to budding manhood. But of a surety man's last day must ever be awaited, and none be counted happy till his death, till his last funeral rites are paid. One grandson of thine, Actaeon, midst all thy happiness, first brought thee cause of grief, upon whose brow strange horns appeared, and whose dogs greedily lapped their master's blood. But if you seek the truth, you will find the cause of this in Fortune's fault, and not in any crime of his. For what crime had mere mischance? 'Twas on a mountain stained with the blood of many slaughtered beasts. Midday had shortened every object's shade, and the sun was at equal distance from either goal. Then young Actaeon with friendly speech thus addressed his comrades of the chase, as they fared through the trackless wastes. Both nets and spears, my friends, are dripping with our quarry's blood, and the day has given us good luck enough. When once more Aurora, borne on her saffron car, shall bring back the day, we will resume our proposed task. Now Phoebus is midway in his course, and cleaves the very fields with his burning rays. Cease then your present task, and bear home the well-wrought nets. The men performed his bidding, and ceased their toil. There was a vale in that region, thick grown with pine and cypress with their sharp needles. 'Twas called Gargaphe, the sacred haunt of high-girt Diana. In its most secret nook there was a well-shaded grotto, wrought by no artist's hand. But Nature by her own cunning had imitated art, for she had shaped a native arch of the living rock and soft tufa. A sparkling spring with its slender stream babbled on one side, and widened into a pool girt with grassy banks. Here the goddess of the wild woods, when weary with the chase, was wont to bathe her maiden limbs in the crystal water. On this day, having come to the grotto, she gives to the keeping of her armor-bearer among her nymphs her hunting spear, her quiver, and her unstrung bow. Another takes on her arm the robe she has laid by. Two unbind her sandals from her feet. But Theban Crocalee, defter than the rest, binds into a knot the locks which have fallen down her mistress' neck, her own locks streaming free the while. Others bring water, Nephele, Hyale, and Rhanes, Psacus, and Phiale, and pour it out from their capacious urns. And while Titania is bathing there in her accustomed pool, lo, Cadmus' grandson, his day's toil deferred, comes wandering through the unfamiliar woods with unsure footsteps, and enters Diana's grove, for so fate would have it. As soon as he entered the grotto, bedewed with fountain spray, the naked nymphs smote upon their breasts at sight of the man, and filled all the grove with their shrill sudden cries. Then they thronged around Diana, seeking to hide her body with their own. But the goddess stood head and shoulders over all the rest, and red as the clouds which flush beneath the sun's slant rays, red as the rosy dawn, were the cheeks of Diana as she stood there in view without her robes. Then, though the band of nymphs pressed close about her, she stood turning aside a little, and cast back her gaze. And though she would fain have had her arrows ready, what she had she took up, the water, and flung it into the young man's face. And as she poured the avenging drops upon his hair, she spoke these words, foreboding his coming doom: "Now you are free to tell that you have seen me all unrobed, if you can tell." No more than this she spoke, but on the head which she had sprinkled she caused to grow the horns of the long-lived stag, stretched out his neck, sharpened his ear-tips, gave feet in place of hands, changed his arms into long legs, and clothed his body with a spotted hide. And last of all she planted fear within his heart. Away in flight goes Autonoe's heroic son, marveling to find himself so swift of foot. But when he sees his features and his horns in a clear pool, "Oh, woe is me," he tries to say, but no words come. He groans, the only speech he has, and tears course down his changeling cheeks. Only his mind remains unchanged. What is he to do? Shall he go home to the royal palace, or shall he stay skulking in the woods? Shame blocks one course, and fear the other. But while he stands perplexed, he sees his hounds, note, Tigress, Might, White, Soot, Spartan, Whirlwind, Swift, Cyprian, Wolf, Grasper, Black, Shag, Fury, White Tooth, Barker, Black Hare, Beast Killer, Mountaineer. Return to text. And first comes Melampus and keen-scented Icnobates, baying loud on the trail. Icnobates a Cretan dog, Melampus a Spartan. Then others come rushing on, swifter than the wind, Pamphagus, Dorceus, and Oribasius, Arcadians all, staunch Nebrophonos, fierce Theron and Lelaps, Pterolas the swift of foot, and keen-scented Agre, savage Hyleus, but lately ripped up by a wild boar, the wolf-dog Nape, and the trusty shepherd Poeminus, Harpaea with her 2 pups, Sicyonian Ladon, thin in the flanks, Dromus, Canacee, Stycte, Tigris, Alce, white-haired Leucon, black Aspolus, Lacon, renowned for strength, and fleet Aiello, Thoas and swift Lycisce, with her brother Cyprius, Harpalos, with a white spot in the middle of his black forehead, Melanius and shaggy Lachne. 2 dogs from a Cretan father and a Spartan mother, Labros and Agriados, shrill-tongued Hylactor, and others whom it were too long to name. The whole pack, keen with the lust of blood, over crags, over cliffs, over trackless rocks, where the way is hard, where there is no way at all, follow on. He flees over the very ground where he is oft-time pursued. He flees, the pity of it, his own faithful hounds. He longs to cry out, "I am Actaeon, recognize your own master," but words fail his desire. All the air resounds with their baying, and first Melanchites fixes his fangs in his back, Theridamas next, or Asitrophus has fastened on his shoulder. They had set out later than the rest, but by a short cut across the mountain had outstripped their course. While they hold back their master's flight, the whole pack collects, and all together bury their fangs in his body, till there is no place left for further wounds. He groans and makes a sound which, though not human, is still one no deer could utter, and fills the heights he knows so well with mournful cries. And now, down on his knees in suppliant attitude, just like one in prayer, he turns his face in silence towards them, as if stretching out beseeching arms. But his companions, ignorant of his plight, urge on the fierce pack with their accustomed shouts, looking all around for Actaeon, and call, each louder than the rest, for Actaeon, as if he were far away. He turns his head at the sound of his name, and complain that he is absent, and is missing, through sloth, the sight of the quarry brought to bay. Well, indeed, might he wish to be absent, but he is here, and well might he wish to see, not to feel, the fierce doings of his own hounds. They throng him on every side, and plunging their muzzles in his flesh, mangle their master under the deceiving form of the deer. Nor, as they say, till he had been done to death by many wounds, was the wrath of the quiver-bearing goddess appeased. Common talk wavered this way and that. To some the goddess seemed more cruel than was just. Others called her act worthy of her austere virginity. Both sides found good reasons for their judgment. Jove's wife alone spake no word either in blame or praise, but rejoiced in the disaster which had come to Agenor's house. For she had now transferred her anger from her Tyrian rival, note, Europa, whose story has already been told, return to text, to those who shared her blood. And lo, A fresh pang was added to her former grievance, and she was smarting with the knowledge that Semele was pregnant with a seed of mighty Jove. Words of reproach were rising to her lips, but "What," she cried, "have I ever gained by reproaches? 'Tis she must feel my wrath. Herself, if I am duly called most mighty Juno, must I attack, if I am fit to wield in my hand the jewelled scepter, if I am Queen of Heaven, the sister and the wife of Jove, at least his sister. And yet methinks she is content with his stolen love, and the insult to my bed is but for a moment. But she has conceived, that still was lacking, and bears plain proof of her guilt in her full womb, and seeks, a fortune that has scarce been mine, to be made a mother from Jove. So great is her trust in beauty. But I will cause that trust to mock her. I am no daughter of Saturn, if she go not down to the Stygian pool, plunged thither by her Jupiter himself." On this she rose from her seat, and, wrapped in a saffron cloud, she came to the home of Semele. But before she put aside her concealing cloud, she feigned herself an old woman, whitening her hair at the temples, furrowing her skin with wrinkles, and walking with bowed form and tottering steps. She spoke also in the voice of age, and became even as Beroe, the Epidaurian nurse of Semele. When, after gossiping about many things, they came to mention of Jove's name, the old woman sighed and said, "I pray that it be Jupiter, but I am afraid of all such doings. Many, pretending to be gods, have found entrance into modest chambers, but to be Jove is not enough. Make him prove his love, if he is true Jove, as great and glorious as he is when welcomed by heavenly Juno. So great and glorious, pray him grant thee his embrace, and first don all his splendors." In such wise did Juno instruct the guileless daughter of Cadmus. She in her turn asked Jove for a boon, unnamed. The god replied, "Choose what thou wilt, and thou shalt suffer no refusal. And, that thou mayst be more assured, I swear it by the divinity of the seething Styx, whose godhead is the fear of all the gods." Rejoicing in her evil fortune, too much prevailing, and doomed to perish through her lover's compliance, Semele said, "In such guise as Saturnia beholds thee when thou seekest her arms in love, so show thyself to me." The god would have checked her even as she spoke, but already her words had sped forth into uttered speech. He groans, for neither can she recall her wish, nor he his oath. And so, in deepest distress, he ascends the steeps of heaven, and with his beck drew on the mists that followed. Then, mingling clouds and lightnings and blasts of wind, he took last the thunder, and that fire that none can escape. And yet, whatever way he can, he essays to lessen his own might, nor arms himself now with that bolt with which he had hurled down from heaven Typhoeus of the 100 hands, for that weapon were too deadly. But there is a lighter bolt, to which the Cyclops' hands had given a less devouring flame, a wrath less threatening. The gods call them his second armory. With these in hand, he enters the palace of Agenor's son, the home of Semele. Her mortal body bore not the onrush of heavenly power, and by that gift of wedlock she was consumed. The babe, still not wholly fashioned, is snatched from the mother's womb, and, if report may be believed, sewed up in his father's thigh, there to await its full time of birth. In secret his mother's sister, Ino, watched over his infancy. Thence he was confided to the nymphs of Nysa, who hid him in their cave, and nurtured him with milk. Now, while these things were happening on the earth by the decrees of fate, when the cradle of Bacchus, twice born, was safe, it chanced that Jove, as the story goes, while warmed with wine, put care aside, and bandied good-humoured jests with Juno in an idle hour. "I maintain," said he, "that your pleasure in love is greater than that which we enjoy. She held the opposite view, and so they decided to ask the judgment of wise Tiresias. He knew both sides of love, for once with a blow of his staff he had outraged 2 huge serpents mating in the green forest, and, wonderful to relate, from man he was changed into a woman, and in that form spent 7 years. In the 8th year he saw the same serpents again, and said, "Since in striking you there is such magic power as to change the nature of the giver of the blow, now will I strike you once again." So saying, he struck the serpents, and his former state was restored, and he became as he had been born. He, therefore, being asked to arbitrate the playful dispute of the gods, took sides with Jove. Saturnia, they say, grieved more deeply than she should, and than the issue warranted, and condemned the arbitrator to perpetual blindness. But the Almighty Father, for no god may undo what another god has done, in return for his loss of sight, gave Tiresias the power to know the future, lightening the penalty by the honor. He, famed far and near through all the Boeotian towns, gave answers that none could censure to those who sought his aid. The first to make trial of his truth and assured utterances was the nymph Liriope, whom once the river god Cephisus embraced in his winding stream and ravished, while imprisoned in his waters. When her time came, the beauteous nymph brought forth a child, whom a nymph might love even as a child, and named him Narcissus. When asked whether this child would live to reach well-ripened age, the seer replied, "If he ne'er knows himself." Long did the saying of the prophet seem but empty words, but what befell proved its truth, the event, the manner of his death, the strangeness of his infatuation. For Narcissus had reached his 16th year, and might seem either boy or man. Many youths and many maidens sought his love, but in that slender form was pride so cold that no youth, no maiden touched his heart. Once, as he was driving the frightened deer into its nets, a certain nymph of strange speech beheld him, resounding echo, who could neither hold her peace when others spoke, nor yet begin to speak till others had addressed her. Up to this time Echo had form, and was not a voice alone, and yet, though talkative, she had no other use of speech than now, only the power out of many words to repeat the last she heard. Juno had made her thus. For often, when she might have surprised the nymphs in company with her lord upon the mountain sides, Echo would cunningly hold the goddess in long talk until the nymphs were fled. When Saturnia realized this, she said to her, "That tongue of thine, by which I have been tricked, shall have its power curtailed, and enjoy the briefest use of speech." The event confirmed her threat. Nevertheless, she does repeat the last phrases of a speech, and returns the words she hears. Now, when she saw Narcissus wandering through the fields, she was inflamed with love, and followed him by stealth. And the more she followed, the more she burned by a nearer flame, as when quick-burning sulphur, smeared round the tops of torches, catches fire from another fire brought near. Oh, how often does she long to approach him with alluring words, and make soft prayers to him! But her nature forbids this, nor does it permit her to begin. But as it allows, she is ready to await the sounds to which she may give back her own words. By chance the boy, separated from his faithful companions, had cried, "Is anyone here?" And "Here," cried Echo back. Amazed, he looks around in all directions, and with loud voice cries, "Come!" and "Come!" she calls him, calling. He looks behind him, and seeing no one coming, calls again, "Why do you run from me?" and hears in answer his own words again. He stands still, deceived by the answering voice, and "Here let us meet," he cries. Echo, never to answer other sound more gladly, cries, "Let us meet." And to help her own words, she comes forth from the woods, that she may throw her arms around the neck she longs to clasp. But he flees at her approach, and fleeing says, "Hands off, embrace me not. May I die before I give you power o'er me." "I give you power o'er me," she says, and nothing more. Thus spurned, she lurks in the woods, hides her shamed face among the foliage, and lives from that time on in lonely caves. But still, though spurned, her love remains and grows on grief. Her sleepless cares waste away her wretched form. She becomes gaunt and wrinkled, and all moisture fades from her body into the air. Only her voice and her bones remain, then only voice, for they say that her bones were turned to stone. She hides in woods, and is seen no more upon the mountain sides, but all may hear her, for voice, and voice alone, still lives in her. Thus had Narcissus mocked her, thus had he mocked other nymphs of the waves or mountains, thus had he mocked the companies of men. At last one of these scorned youth, lifting up his hands to heaven, prayed, "So may he himself love, and not gain the thing he loves." The goddess Nemesis heard his righteous prayer. There was a clear pool with silvery bright water, to which no shepherds ever came, or she-goats feeding on the mountain side, or any other cattle, whose smooth surface neither bird nor beast nor falling bough ever ruffled. Grass grew all around its edge, fed by the water near, and a coppice that would never suffer the sun to warm the spot. Here the youth, worn by the chase and the heat, lies down, attracted thither by the appearance of the place and by the spring. While he seeks to slake his thirst, another thirst springs up, and while he drinks, he is smitten by the sight of the beautiful form he sees. He loves an unsubstantial hope, and thinks that substance which is only shadow. He looks in speechless wonder at himself, and hangs there motionless in the same expression, like a statue carved from Parian marble. Prone on the ground, he gazes at his eyes, twin stars, and his locks, worthy of Bacchus, worthy of Apollo, on his smooth cheeks, his ivory neck, the glorious beauty of his face, the blush mingled with snowy white. All things, in short, he admires, for which he is himself admired. Unwittingly he desires himself. He praises, and is himself what he praises, and while he seeks, is sought. Equally he kindles love, and burns with love. How often did he offer vain kisses on the elusive pool! How often did he plunge his arms into the water, seeking to clasp the neck he sees there, but did not clasp himself in them. What he sees he knows not, but that which he sees he burns for, and the same delusion mocks and allures his eyes. Oh, fondly foolish boy, why vainly seek to clasp a fleeting image? What you seek is nowhere, but turn yourself away, and the object of your love will be no more. That which you behold is but the shadow of a reflected form, and has no substance of its own. With you it comes, with you it stays, and it will go with you, if you can go. No thought of food or rest can draw him from the spot, but, stretched on the shaded grass, he gazes on that false image with eyes that cannot look their fill, and through his own eyes perishes. Raising himself a little, and stretching his arms to the trees, he cries, "Did any one, O ye woods, ever love more cruelly than I? You know, for you have been the convenient haunts of many lovers. Do you, in the ages past, for your life is one of centuries, remember any one who has pined away like this? I am charmed, and I see, but what I see and what charms me I cannot find. So great a delusion holds my love, and to make me grieve the more, no mighty ocean separates us, no long road, no mountain ranges, no city walls with close shut gates. By a thin barrier of water we are kept apart. He himself is eager to be embraced, for often as I stretch my lips towards the loosened wave, so often with upturned face he strives to lift his lips to mine. You would think he could be touched, so small a thing it is that separates our loving hearts. Whoever you are, come forth hither. Why, O peerless youth, do you elude me? or whither do you go when I strive to reach you? Surely my form and age are not such that you should shun them, and me too, the nymphs of love. Some ground for hope you offer with your friendly looks, and when I have stretched out my arms to you, you stretch yours too. When I have smiled, you smile back, and I have often seen tears when I weep on your cheeks. My becks you answer with your nod, and, as I suspect from the movement of your sweet lips, you answer my words as well, but words which do not reach my ears. Oh, I am he. I have felt it. I know now my own image. I burn with love of my own self. I both kindle the flames and suffer them. What shall I do? Shall I be wooed or woo? Why woo at all? What a desire I have! The very abundance of my riches beggars me. Oh, that I might be parted from my own body, and, strange prayer for a lover, I would that what I love were absent from me. And now grief is sapping my strength. But a brief space of life remains to me, and I am cut off in my life's prime. Death is nothing to me, for in death I shall leave my troubles. I would he that is loved might live longer, but as it is, we two shall die together in one breath." He spoke, and half distraught turned again to the same image. His tears ruffled the water, and dimly the image came back from the troubled pool. As he saw it thus depart, he cried, "Oh, whither do you flee? Stay here, and desert not him who loves thee, cruel one. Still may it be mine to gaze on what I may not touch, and by that gaze feed my unhappy passion." While he thus grieves, he plucks away his tunic at its upper fold, and beats his bare breast with pallid hands. His breast, when that it is struck, takes on a delicate glow, just as apples sometimes, though white in part, flush red in other part, or as grapes hanging in clusters take on a purple hue when not yet ripe. As soon as he sees this, when the water has become clear again, he can bear no more, but as the yellow wax melts before a gentle heat, as hoar frost melts before the warm morning sun, so does he, wasted with love, pine away, and is slowly consumed by its hidden fire. No longer has he that ruddy color mingling with the white, no longer that strength and vigor, and all that lately was so pleasing to behold. Scarce does his form remain, which once Echo had loved so well. But when she saw it, though still angry and forgetful, she felt pity, and as often as the poor boy says, "Alas!" again with answering utterance she cries, "Alas!" and as his hands beat his shoulders, she gives back the same sounds of woe. His last words, as he gazed into the familiar spring, were these, "Alas, dear boy, vainly beloved!" and the place gave back his words. And when he said, "Farewell, farewell," said Echo too. He drooped his weary head on the green grass, and death sealed the eyes that marveled at their master's beauty. And even when he had been received into the infernal abodes, he kept on gazing on his image in the Stygian pool. His Naiad sisters beat their breasts, and shore their locks in sign of grief for their dear brother. The Dryads too lamented, and Echo gave back their sounds of woe. And now they were preparing the funeral pile, the brandished torches and the bier, but his body was nowhere to be found. In place of his body they find a flower, its yellow center girt with white petals. When this story was noised abroad, it spread the well-deserved fame of the seer throughout the cities of Greece, and great was the name of Tiresias. Yet Actaeon's son Pentheus, the scoffer at gods, alone of all men flouted the seer, laughed at the old man's words of prophecy, and taunted him with his darkness and loss of sight. But he, shaking his hoary head in warning, said, How fortunate wouldst thou be if this light were dark to thee also, so that thou mightst not behold the rites of Bacchus. For the day will come, nay, I foresee 'tis near, when the new God shall come hither, Liber, son of Semele. Unless thou worship him as is his due, thou shalt be torn into 1,000 pieces, and scattered everywhere, and shalt with thy blood defile the woods, and thy mother and thy mother's sisters. So shall it come to pass, for thou shalt refuse to honor the God, and shalt complain that in my blindness I have seen all too well. Even while he speaks, the son of Actaeon flings him forth. But his words did indeed come true, and his prophecies were accomplished. The God is now come, and the fields resound with the wild cries of revellers. The people rush out of the city in throngs, men and women, old and young, nobles and commons, all mixed together, and hasten to celebrate the new rites. What madness, ye sons of the serpent's teeth, ye seed of Mars, has dulled your reason? Pentheus cries. Can clashing cymbals, can the pipe of crooked horn, can shallow tricks of magic, women's shrill cries, wine-heated madness, vulgar throngs, and empty drums, can all these vanquish men, for whom real war with its drawn swords, the blare of trumpets and lines of glittering spears had no terrors? You, ye elders, should I give you praise, who sailed the long reaches of the sea and planted here your Tyre, here your wandering Penates, and who now permit them to be taken without a struggle? Or you, ye young men of fresher age and nearer to my own, for whom once 'twas seemly to bear arms and not the thyrsus, to be sheltered by helmets and not garlands, be mindful, I pray, from what seed you are sprung, and show the spirit of the serpent, who in his single strength killed many foes. For his fountain and his pool he perished, but do you conquer for your glory's sake. He did to death brave men, do you but put to flight unmanly men, and save your ancestral honor. If it be the fate of Thebes not to endure for long, I would the enginery of war and heroes might batter down her walls, and that sword and fire might roar around her. Then should we be unfortunate, but our honor without stain. We should bewail, not seek to conceal our wretched state. Then our tears would be without shame. But now our Thebes shall fall before an untried boy, whom neither arts of war assist, nor spears, nor horsemen, but whose weapons are scented locks, soft garlands, purple and gold inwoven in embroidered robes. But forthwith, only do you stand aside, I will force him to confess that his father's name is borrowed, and his sacred rites a lie. Did Acrisius have spirit enough to despise his empty godhead, and to shut the gates of Argos in his face? And shall Pentheus and all Thebes tremble at this wanderer's approach? Go, quickly, this to his slaves, go bring this plotter hither, and in chains. Let there be no dull delay to my bidding. His grandsire addresses him in words of reprimand, and Athamas, and all his counselors, and they vainly strive to curb his will. He is all the more eager for their warning. His mad rage is fretted by restraint, and grows apace, and their very efforts at control but make him worse. So have I seen a river, where nothing obstructed its course, flow smoothly on with but a gentle murmur, but where it was held in check by dams of timber and stones set in its way, foaming and boiling it went, fiercer for the obstruction. But now the slaves come back, all covered with blood, and when their master asks where Bacchus is, they say that they have not seen him. But this companion of his, they say, this priest of his sacred rites, we have taken, and they deliver up, his hands bound behind his back, one of Etruscan stock, a votary of Bacchus. Him Pentheus eyes awhile with gaze made terrible by his wrath, and with difficulty withholding his hand from punishment, he says, Thou, fellow, doomed to perish, and by thy death to serve as a warning to others, tell me thy name, thy parents, and thy country, and why thou dost devote thyself to this new cult? He fearlessly replies, My name is Acoetes, and my country is Maeonia. My parents were but humble folk. My father left me no fields or sturdy bullocks to till them, no woolly sheep, no cattle. He himself was poor, and used to catch fish with hook and line and rod, and draw them leaping from the stream. His craft was all his wealth, and when he passed it on to me, he said, Take this craft, 'tis all my fortune. Be you my heir and successor in it. And in dying he left me nothing but the waters. This alone can I call my heritage. Soon, that I might not always stay planted on the selfsame rocks, I learned to steer ships with guiding hand. I studied the stars, the rainy constellation of the Iolenian goat, Digiti, the Hyades, the bears. I learned the winds and whence they blow. I learned what harbors are best for ships. It chanced that while making for Delos, I was driven out of my course to the shore of Chios, and made the land with well-skilled oars. Light leaping, we landed on the wet shore and spent the night. As soon as the eastern sky began to redden, I rose and bade my men go for fresh water, showing them the way that led to the spring. For my own task, from a high hill I observed the direction of the wind, then called my comrades and started back on board. Lo, here we are, cried Opheltes, first of all the men, bringing with him a prize, so he considered it, which he had found in a deserted field, a little boy with form beautiful as a girl's. He seemed to stagger, as if o'ercome with wine and sleep, and could scarce follow him who led. I gazed on his garb, his face, his walk, and all I saw seemed more to me than mortal. This I perceived, and said to my companions, What divinity is in that mortal body I know not, but assuredly a divinity is therein. Whoever thou art, be gracious unto us, and prosper our undertakings. Grant pardon also to these men. Pray not for us, said Dictys, than whom none was more quick to climb the topmost yard, and slide down on firm-grasped rope. Libys seconded this speech. So did yellow-haired Melanthus, the lookout, and Alcimedon and Epopeus, who by his voice marked the time for the rowers, and urged on their flagging spirits. And all the rest approved, so blind and heedless was their greed for booty. And yet I shall not permit this ship to be defiled by such sacrilege, I said. Here must my authority have greater weight. And I resisted their attempt to come on board. Then did Lycabas break out into wrath, the most reckless man of the crew, who, driven from Tuscany, was suffering exile as a punishment for the foul crime of murder. He, while I withstood him, tore at my throat with his strong hands, and would have hurled me overboard, if, scarce knowing what I did, I had not clung to a rope that held me back. The godless crew applauded Lycabas. Then at last Bacchus, for it was he, as if aroused from slumber by the outcry, and as if his wine-dimmed senses were coming back, said, What are you doing? Why this uproar? And tell me, ye sailor men, how did I get here, and whither are you planning to take me? Be not afraid, said Proreus. Tell me what port thou wish to make, and you shall be set off at any place you choose. Then turn your course to Naxos, said Liber. That is my home, and there shall you find yourselves a friendly land. By the sea and all its gods the treacherous fellows swore that they would do this, and bade me get the painted vessel under sail. Naxos lay off upon the right, and as I was setting my sails towards the right, Opheltes said, What are you doing, you fool? What madness? And each one for himself supplied the words, Holds you! Take the left tack. The most of them, by nods and winks, let me know what they wanted, and some whispered in my ear. I could not believe my senses, and I said to them, Then let someone else take the helm, and declared that I would have nor part nor lot in their wicked scheme. They all cried out upon me, and kept up their wrathful mutterings, and one of them, Athalion, broke out, I'd have you know the safety of us all does not depend on you alone. So saying, he came and took my place at the helm, and, leaving the course for Naxos, steered off in another direction. Then the god, in mockery of them, as if he had just discovered their faithlessness, looked out upon the sea from the curved stern, and in seeming tears cried out, "These are not the shores you promised me, you sailor men, and this is not the land I sought. What have I done to be so treated? And what glory will you gain if you, grown men, deceive a little boy? If you, so many, overcome just one?" I was long since in tears, but the godless crew mocked my tears, and swept the seas with speeding oars. Now by the god himself I swear, for there is no god more surely near than he, that what I speak is truth, though far beyond belief. The ship stands still upon the waves, as if a dry dock held her. The sailors, in amaze, redouble their striving at the oars, and make all sail, hoping thus to speed their way by twofold power. But ivy twines and clings about the oars, creeps upward with many a back-flung catching fold, and decks the sails with heavy hanging clusters. The god himself, with his brow garlanded with clustering berries, waves a wand wreathed with ivy leaves. Around him lie tigers, the forms, though empty all, of lynxes and of fierce spotted panthers. The men leap overboard, driven on by madness or by fear. And first Medon's body begins to grow dark, and his back to be bent in a well-marked curve. Lycabas starts to say to him, "Into what strange creature are you turning?" But as he speaks, his own jaws spread wide, his nose becomes hooked, and his skin becomes hard and covered with scales. But Libes, while he seeks to ply the sluggish oars, sees his hands suddenly shrunk in size to things that can no longer be called hands at all, but fins. Another, catching at a twisted rope with his arms, finds he has no arms, and goes plunging backwards with limbless body into the sea. The end of his tail is curved like the horns of a half-moon. They leap about on every side, sending up showers of spray. They emerge from the water only to return to the depths again. They sport like a troop of dancers, tossing their bodies in wanton sport, and drawing in and blowing out the water from their broad nostrils. Of but now 20 men, for the ship bore so many, I alone remained. And as I stood quaking and trembling with cold fear, and hardly knowing what I did, the god spoke words of cheer to me, and said, "Be of good courage, and hold on your course to Naxos. Arrived there, I have joined the rites, and am one of the Bacchanalian throng." Then Pentheus said, "We have lent ear to this long rambling tale, that by such delay our anger might lose its might. Ye slaves, now hurry him away, rack his body with fearsome tortures, and so send him down to Stygian night." Straightway Acoetes the Tyrrhenian was dragged out and shut up in a strong dungeon. And while the slaves were getting the cruel instruments of torture ready, the iron, the fire, of their own accord the doors flew open wide. Of their own accord, with no one loosing them, the chains fell from the prisoner's arms. But Pentheus stood fixed in his purpose. He no longer sent messengers, but went himself to where Cathiron, the chosen seat for the god's sacred rites, was resounding with songs and the shrill cries of worshippers. As a spirited horse snorts when the brazen trumpet with tuneful voice sounds out the battle, and his eagerness for the fray waxes hot, so did the air, pulsing with the long-drawn cries, stir Pentheus, and the wild uproar in his ears heated his wrath white-hot. About midway of the mountain, bordered with thick woods, was an open plain, free from trees, in full view from every side. Here, as Pentheus was spying with profane eyes upon the sacred rites, his mother was the first to see him, first to rush madly on him, first with hurled thyrsus to smite her son. "Ho, there! My sisters, come!" she cried. "See that huge boar prowling in our fields. Now must I rend him." The whole mad throng rush on him. From all sides they come and pursue the frightened wretch, Yes, frightened now, and speaking milder words, cursing his folly, and confessing that he has sinned. Sore wounded, he cries out, "Oh, help, my Aunt Autonoe! Let the ghost of Actaeon move your heart." She knows not who Actaeon is, and tears the suppliant's right arm away. Ino, in frenzy, reins away his left, and now the wretched man has no arms to stretch out in prayer to his mother, but, showing his mangled stumps where his arms have been torn away, he cries, "Oh, mother, see!" Agave howls madly at the sight, and tosses her head with wildly streaming hair. Off she tears his head, and holding it in bloody hands, she yells, "See, comrades, see my toil and its reward of victory!" Not more quickly are leaves, when touched by the first cold of autumn, and now lightly clinging, whirled from the lofty tree by the wind, than is Pentheus torn limb from limb by those impious hands. Taught by such a warning, the Thebans throng the new god's sacred rites, burn incense, and bow down before his shrines. End of Book 3. End of Section 4.